Welcome back to Steele and Vance, and I know this next subject is something that hits everybody all over the city, the province, the country, really, but we're going to hone in here on what's happening in Vancouver crime-wise.
Yeah, and we should say my husband's a police chief in Surrey. You've got a relative.
My cousin Cindy is VPD.
Full disclosure, but it has been so concerning. I live and work downtown, and there have been stranger attacks and people who have died in horrific, violent, senseless acts that make me crazy. And I think, what is going on? Yeah. And the most recent one took place in Chinatown just a few days ago. We're talking about a 22-year-old Afghanistan refugee who was working for Skip the Dishes, went to lock his bike up, and somebody came up behind him and started stabbing him in the throat and the torso. This guy was in really serious condition.
For doing nothing. Like he hadn't done it unprovoked.
He didn't even know the person was coming.
Right, and stranger attacks, there is the change. I mean, clearly there are certain areas of town that have always had sort of an air of more danger than others, but I'm a mother of a 14-year-old. He's free-ranging. He's got a job now. He's got his compass card. Scary. He wants to go everywhere, and I do worry about this spike in stranger danger. I literally have not used that term with my child because I didn't want to create that feeling like you're always in fear. But I have taught him to always look for the people in uniform for help.
Exactly. And we want to bring in now from the Vancouver Police Department, Deputy Chief Howard Chow. Thank you so much for joining us. When we're talking about, I think it's 4 stranger attacks a day, what is going on? People are scared.
Sure. And you know what? I think they have every right to be scared. We're seeing 4 stranger attacks. And I think it's important to clarify what that means. These are motiveless, random attacks on people. So it's the mother and perhaps young child going to the park, and somebody comes up to her and punches her in the head. Somebody's plugging a meter, and somebody stabs the person. We've had people going to coffee shops and getting stabbed. So 4 times a day in the city of Vancouver, these sorts of assaults are taking place.
So why? And what is it?
There's a constellation of reasons, but we know that a large percentage are suffering from mental illness. We know that from our early indication, from our early data. We released some information on that about 6 months back, where we're looking at probably to the tune of about 75, 77%.
Really?
But those are early numbers.
Yeah.
And I also want to clarify, because I think it's important to do that, when we're talking about those living with mental illness, a vast, vast, vast majority of them are significantly contributors to society, an important part of society.
And oftentimes the target of being of a crime or an issue. So it's not like just laying it on mental health, but there are some significant challenges here in the city.
If you're suffering from mental illness, you're 19 times more likely to be a victim of a violent crime.
Yeah.
So that means we've got to do better for that demographic as well. Yeah. But when I talk about the vast majority of those that are suffering from mental illness, 1 in 5 in Canada, are contributing parts of our community. Right. We're talking about the smallest portion, and that's a portion that we've got to have more attention to. That means more resources. It means better care. It means more attention at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're decompensating and needing help. It doesn't mean they've got to try to navigate and figure this out when they're in crisis.
Here's the thing, though. I mean, I know during the pandemic we saw issues with the drug supply being more toxic, but why in the last 2 or 3 years are we seeing so much violence? Why would the mental health issues be, escalating to the point where people are afraid to walk the streets?
Well, I think all of our systems, including policing and criminal justice system, probably hasn't been working as efficient as it should have been in the last 2 years. And we all know that. There's been log jams at different areas. And repeat offenders, all this that's going on, you bet. And I want to talk about that in a quick second.
So do we.
Yeah, no, I get it.
There's so much to come out of one small segment, but go.
But I'll tell you is that I think a large part is, much like all of us have suffered more stress over the last 2 years, so have those that have, are suffering from some of these.
Exponentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And not having the access to care, and not having the outreach that may be hitting on them, him or her 2 or 3 times a
and
week.
Isolation, maybe?
100%.
Exacerbating the situation?
Yeah. Can we talk about the prolific offenders? Because I know that there are some recommendations coming forward imminently on how to deal with prolific offenders who the public perceives this sort of catch and release, in and out. You guys are doing your job. The courts sort of spit them back on the street with no treatment? How do you feel about it? What needs to happen?
Sure. So I think it's also important to know that there's two separate buckets, multiple buckets, but they're different from our unprovoked assaults. So a lot of the prolific offenders, probably 75, 80% of those are suffering from drug addiction. And they're exactly, and mostly property crimes, breaking into cars, breaking into homes, businesses, to steal so they can support their habits.
So they're not stabbing someone, but there are other victims. The person whose car's been broken into, the Toronto Dominion Bank that had 7 windows smashed.
That's right.
There's a cost to society.
Huge cost.
What do we do? What's the answer with these prolific offenders?
Well, I'll tell you within Vancouver, and I know other jurisdictions have spoken very publicly about it, but within Vancouver, we work very well with our Crown. So whenever we're saying, hey, look, we've got somebody who has, and many of these I know you're well aware of with contacts in policing, they will have 600, 700, 800 contacts with police in their history. It's nuts.
Yeah.
And the cost to the system and the cost to our frontline officers, every single day, we've got 650 calls for service for the police. Every single day. Every 2 minutes, it's a brand new call. And, you know, like when people say, boy, you got too many resources, where's that sweet spot? I'll tell you where the sweet spot is when you've got people that are waiting hours, if not days, for the police to attend, because we are triaging much like an emergency ward, is that if you can't get to them, that's a problem.
I want to jump in here with only just 2 minutes left to go here. As a parent, I keep throwing out that I'm a mom, but this is real for me. The member of my family who I mentioned off the top, who Linda mentioned, who's VPD, was a school liaison officer. Happened to be one at the school where my dad taught for 35 years after Dad had retired. But the change in that program, can we, as someone who hopes it comes back with proper tweaks to the system that will help with what people say might be the issue here, will it come back?
Well, you know what? I'm a huge fan of school liaison officers.
Me too.
And I know that. And I'll tell you is that it's a decision made by the school board or by the board of the trustees. Yeah. So that will be their decision to deal with. But I hear this all the time from parents, from school administrators, saying that you need officers back in. So we're in the midst of a gang war. We're in the midst of an opioid crisis. Yeah. And the first thing all the academics and researchers will tell you is you need to get them while they're young. You need to get them while they're at the schools.
And kids know. Kids know what's going on in their schools, and they don't know where to go with it. Because, you know, they say snitches get stitches. Yeah. There's that prevalent conversation happening right now in high schools all over the city.
You know what I want to say for the people out there who are like, defund the police, when they don't even really know what that means? I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
To you and to all the members of the Vancouver Police Department who do a really tough job under tough circumstances. And thank you for watching out for us and doing a job that a lot of other people don't want to do.
Always a chair for you here on Steel and Vance as well. It goes by too fast.
The Vancouver Police Department Deputy Chief Howard Chow. Coming up next on Steel and Vance, do we really, Jody, need a national holiday to mourn the Queen? This move is being cheered by some people and it's being criticized by others, like parents now scrambling to arrange childcare. Stay tuned for that.